type of thing. And I could not get to the fifth and most important reason that you shouldn't vote, which is your vote doesn't count. It counts about as much as a grain of sand on the beach. And I didn't even get from there to saying, anyway, it's not who votes that counts. It's like Stalin correctly observed. It's who counts the votes. And this was in Chicago, where Donahue did that. They could have understood that. So, anyway, this kind of led me to the psychology of Bubis Americanus, to the unwashed mob out there. I mean, I remember one guy in this audience when I was making on the Donahue show, when I was making a comment about taxes as theft and all this type of thing, some observation, and I swear this is the truth. You can find the tape. I don't even have the tape of it anymore. It's too bad, because it was one of my best performances ever. And I said, and the guy says, raises his hand, and he says, well, why doesn't the government pay for these things? I mean, that is the level of thinking politically. So trying to change things in this country is totally impossible. If somebody can ask a question like that, why doesn't the government pay for it? When I said taxpayers are paying for it, it's completely pointless. It's a complete waste of time, and you're kidding yourself looking for political change. But this kind of led me over the years to think about the psychology of the average chimpanzee out there. And I'm a believer in the fact that Pareto's law is a correct analysis of reality. Now, you all know Pareto's law. It's the 80-20 rule. 20% of your salesmen make 80% of the sales. 20% of the population commits 80% of the crimes. It's a normal bell-shaped curve. And I've come to the conclusion that libertarianism, God forbid anarchism, God forbid Discordianism, is actually a genetic mutation. And it's very hard to change a genetic mutation. It is part of your being. This is not to say that it's a waste of time to try to explain. Don't try to convince. That's pointless. Then you get into an argument with people. And when you're in an argument with people, they feel like they've got to win. So you're not going to get anywhere. The most that I do is say something and let those who have ears hear, as it were. But getting back to Pareto's law, my interpretation of one aspect of it is that 80% of human beings are basically decent, social, get along, go along, people of goodwill. I'd say 80%, according to Pareto's law. What about the other 20%? That other 20% are what you might call potential trouble sources. They can blow either way in the wind, depending on how they read the situation. They're kind of amoral, not immoral. The real problem, that's bad. But the real problem is when you get down to the 20% of that 20%. Now you're dealing with people with criminal personalities, people that are basically of bad will. And you can take it further, 20% of the 20% of the 20%. Now, here's the problem that we're confronting right now in the US. It's that those of you who are, you're all libertarians, you're all anarchists, we're on the other side of that bell-shaped curve, the other 20% on the other side, tiny little tail on the other side, opposite from these people. But here's the problem. All systems, I don't care what system you're looking at, I don't care what organization or company or whatever group you're looking at, they all degrade over time. They all lose their focus. They all go downhill. It's the second law of thermodynamics. It's entropy. It's just the way things work. That's why empires rise and they always fall. Now, here's the problem that we're confronting right now in this country, and I'm afraid in the world as a whole, because this is happening all over the world. It's not just here in the US. The problem is this. People, actually, the state is in the ascendant all over the world, but especially here in the United States. Everybody is thinking politically. Everybody is thinking the government should do this, the government should do that, the government should change things. Everybody, even people basically that are in the 80% of goodwill, decent human beings. So the state, both from a psychological point of view, has insinuated itself throughout the entire society. It's the centerpiece of society. And what is this doing? And of course in the laws, and most people believe they should obey the law. I mean, to me, most laws are frauds. There are only two laws, as far as I'm concerned. Do all that you say that you're going to do, and don't aggress against other people or their property. That's the whole of the law. I can live with the law like that. But the solution is to pass more laws, and that's exactly what these sociopaths are doing. Now, why is it going to get worse from here? If you trace the history of the United States, it started going downhill right from the founding thought. The first thing they did in the 1790s, first important law they passed, was the Alien and Sedition Acts. That was overturned. But then you watch the history of the U.S. It was a model to the world. Incidentally, America is not a place. America is an idea. Keep that in your mind. It's not a piece of geography. It's an idea. And it was unique in the world's history, actually. But it started going downhill with wars, the Civil War, World War I, foreign adventures. And it's like anything that goes downhill. Starts slowly, gets faster and faster and faster, and it's just like it's like a gigantic snowball rolling down a hill. After it reaches a certain point, you cannot stop it. There's too much momentum, there's too much mass in it, and that's exactly where we are today. So where's this all going to end? It's going to end with the snowball of statism and collectivism smashing into the village at the bottom of the valley and destroying the whole damn thing. And then it's going to reorient. Now, I don't know how it's going to reorient, but I can give you some thoughts. It's like, a good example would be the French Revolution in 1789. The French Revolution was an excellent thing. Louis XVI, it was great to get rid of him. Fantastic to get rid of the old regime. But what did they get after that? Then they got Robespierre and the Directorate, and then they got Napoleon. Same thing is going to happen here. I think it's almost inevitable. So it's very bad. And I'll give you another reason. It's not just momentum that's driving the country this way at an accelerating pace. It's the fact that there are basically two types of people in the world. Well, there's lots of ways of dividing people into two classes, but let me give you the one that's relevant now. There are people, because there are two ways you can deal with your fellow human beings, or chimpanzees if you prefer. One is you have people that believe you should deal with other people voluntarily, without using violence, without using force. That's one type. The other type is a person that believes that you should deal with people, or you have to deal with people, or some people, coercively and by force. Now, guess which type are inevitably attracted to government? It's the worst criminal types of personalities. It's always those people that believe you should deal with other people by force that are attracted to government, because the government is congealed force. I mean, as Mao said, the power of the state comes out of a barrel of a gun. So those people like the government. They're attracted to it. They like to go to work for it, and they like to use it. It's part of their psychological makeup. Now, here's the problem. If you started a government, you'd have a normal distribution of personality types. 80% good, 20%, 4%, like as I said before. The problem is this, is that as the system degrades, the second law of thermodynamics works with people too, I think. Eventually, the criminal personalities start making the decent human beings who wound up in the government, maybe because they needed a job, or maybe because they actually are just mistaken and they think it can do some good, it starts edging them out and making them feel uncomfortable. So eventually, it gets taken over by the sociopaths. And history is just full of examples of that. Once they get a real control, like they did in Germany in the 30s, or in Russia in the 20s, forget about it. It ain't gonna turn around. It ain't gonna turn around until that snowball hits the village at the bottom of the hill. And that's exactly where we are right now, in my opinion. So, let's ask ourselves, so what's the government gonna do if this is the trajectory that we're on? Well, to me, it's completely predictable, because even though America is a fantastic idea, it's just an idea. But right now, America has been purged from this geographical area here. It's still pretty nice, but things are happening right before your eyes very rapidly. Now, economically speaking, we're just in the very early stages of what I call the Greater Depression. This is a period of time when the standard of living of most people drops significantly. And even by the government's own statistics, which I don't trust any more than I trust the statistics of the Argentine government, which is where I live most of the year, so I'm reasonably familiar with criminality on a mass scale. Even by their own statistics, the average guy is losing ground. Absolutely. Well, you've got two things that are propping it up. Number one is the average guy, stupid as he is in many ways. Let me define stupid. It doesn't necessarily mean low IQ, because the average IQ is 100, okay? Obviously. I define stupidity as an unwitting tendency to self-destruction. That's a much more accurate and usable definition than low intelligence. So, what's happening is the average guy understands, he wants to improve his self, he wants to improve his station in life, and he understands intuitively, even though he understands nothing about economics, he knows that you've got to produce more than you consume, and you got to save the difference. That creates capital, and that's why the standard of living goes up. One other reason, that's one reason, very important, critical. Second reason is technology, okay? Those are the two reasons that are the mainsprings of why things get better in the material world, okay? Problem is this, is like that nincompoop Mitt Romney said the other day, and he's denying he said it, of course, is that at this point, 47% of the people are net recipients of the government. They don't feel like they have to produce more than they consume. They don't believe they have to create capital at this point. So that cat's out of the bag. There's no way of turning it around at this point. It doesn't matter which one of these people win. I don't know and I don't care. That's funny that I say I don't know and I don't care, because what are the two big problems in the US? Well, lots of problems, but one of them is ignorance and the other is apathy. I don't know and I don't care. So I guess I'm no better than any of those other chimpanzees from that point of view. But I think you can absolutely plan your lives around the fact that we're now involved, and have been for the last 5 years, in the Greater Depression. And we're just in the eye of the storm right now. This is going to be a hurricane. It's going to be not just the biggest thing since the 1930s. This is going to be the biggest thing since the Industrial Revolution. It's going to be the biggest thing since the French Revolution. It's going to be unbelievably ugly. You got 7 billion chimpanzees out there, and they're going to be, this is a whole different speech. I don't want to go into that. But I don't see any way around it now. There's, even if I was elected President of the United States, there's absolutely nothing that could be done right now. If Ron Paul was elected President of the US, the first thing that would happen was he'd have a sit-down with the heads of the NSA, the FBI, the CIA, the DEA, and all these other Praetorian agencies, and maybe overtly, but definitely in an understandable way, they'd make it clear to them that things aren't going to change. So you can't turn this around.